This is DW News Africa. Coming up on the program, are poor Africans paying the price for rich polluters? We meet a community in Congo who've been told to give up their livelihoods to save the forest, but they say the alternatives they've been given aren't working for them. It's part of a voluntary carbon trading scheme where industries in rich countries can compensate for their pollution by investing in green projects in poor countries. But as African governments embrace carbon markets, indigenous communities like this one in Kenya say they fear their land is being taken away. Hello, I'm Christine Munda. Welcome to the program. It's good to have your company. Africa is fast becoming a major player in the global carbon market as countries in the global north ramp up efforts to compensate their carbon emissions. The markets are supposed to incentivize industries to cut back emissions, but are they simply letting big polluters off the hook, shifting the burden to poor communities? Here's how it works. Companies buy carbon credits, allowing them to offset their emissions by paying for projects that reduce carbon elsewhere, like planting trees and protecting forests. Now, take this example. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, it has the world's second largest rainforest, but 500,000 hectares are lost every year because of trees being cut down. One carbon scheme there has seen Western companies funding forest protection, which means that locals have to stop cutting down trees and find another trade. But the community says they've not seen the promised benefits. DW's Jonas Gedding sent this report from Isangi.
Pigs have invaded this site. There used to be fish ponds here. A company called Jadora built them for the villagers in this area of the Isangi forest as part of a carbon credit scheme. In return, the locals were to stop cutting down trees.
They told us that even without exploiting the forest, we could earn a living through fish farming and livestock farming. Look at these fish ponds. They're a complete mess. We've got pigs walking around. Is this the way you do projects with people?
Jadora built the fish ponds here, but didn't help the locals find a market for the products, complains Buena. In the end, the locals gave up. Buena is the head of the Parents Association of the local school. The community waited for more than a decade for its construction, and even that hasn't lived up to the promise.
Just look at the state of the building. It's not in good shape. They built it, but it's still unfinished.
It doesn't even have the basics of proper floors, ceilings or toilets. More schools were promised and never even half built. This was Jadora's company compound in one of the villages. The company's owner, Daniel Blattner, is from a US business family that's been operating in the DRC for decades. He ran a logging company exporting tropical timber, but switched to carbon credits, which many consider more profitable.
Here's how it works. The project owner calculates how many trees are not cut down thanks to the project. The carbon dioxide, therefore not released into the atmosphere, is counted as carbon credits. Those credits can then be sold to companies to offset the emissions their business creates, at least on paper.
Public data shows that the project in Isangi claims to have prevented around 1.3 million tons of carbon being released into the atmosphere between 2009 and 2013. Prices for those carbon credits vary, often between $2 to $4 per ton. Buyers of those credits include the Switzerland arm of Lidl supermarket, Swedish publishing house Bonnier Books, German consultancy Roland Berger, and US financial services company Bloomberg. Local communities are supposed to be supported in changing their lives to help preserve the forest and benefit from the profits. People in Isangi wonder why they didn't get a better share. Georges Kanda is growing rice where there were once trees.
The forest was huge. From the main road to this place, there were no fields. It was just forest, forest, forest.
When the logging company closed, it left no formal jobs for a growing population. The activities Jadora set up to compensate were simply not enough to stop local slash-and-burn farming.
The idea wasn't bad, but the problem was that not everyone found work in their company. Look at me, for example. I wasn't hired. But I wasn't going to stay there complaining. I had to go back to cutting down trees to survive.
The Jadora project ended last year after the Congolese government questioned the legality of the company's land titles. The company's local contact person could not answer our questions, neither could the former manager in Kinshasa. Daniel Blattner did not respond to our interview requests and emails. Projects like this around the world are monitored and certified by a private body, Vera. They told us the first 4 years of this project showed a reduction in deforestation, but they added that it was not able to verify the last 9 years and that they knew that local people were disappointed with how things were going. The carbon project means little to villagers like Gédéon Litete. He cuts wood from the primary forest and sells it, bringing in a tangible income.
If Jadora had provided us with the activities we need to survive, I wouldn't have cut down the forest. I would have stopped this work and the forest wouldn't be destroyed. But they haven't done anything, and that's why I continue to clear the forest.
While the trees of the Isangi forest are cut down with all that it means for the local and the global environment, around 120 kilometers away, Daniel Blattner's son Brandon is set to begin a new carbon project. The green rush goes on.
But in Sierra Leone, carbon trading is playing a role in protecting the country's first UNESCO Natural Heritage Site. Located in the Moa River, Tawai Island measures just 12 square kilometers, yet is home to 11 species of primates and other animals such as the critically endangered African forest elephant and the pygmy hippo. UNESCO praised Tawai Island as a jewel of biodiversity, a sanctuary for rare species, and a model of community management. Now, the lush forest was almost destroyed during Sierra Leone's civil war and endangered by deforestation and poaching. But local environmentalist Tommy Garnett created the Environmental Foundation for Africa in 1992, working to save the island, which was inscribed by UNESCO together with the Gola Rainforest National Park further south.
One here. Gola Forest, on the other hand, a unique feature of it is that it's the largest block of remaining forest, rainforest in Sierra Leone. And it is the first and so far only ecosystem that is receiving financing from carbon credits. And that is after 30 years of a lot of hard work.
Now, in Uganda, the government says carbon trading offers an opportunity to attract climate finance, create jobs, and grow the economy. In May this year, Kampala regulated the carbon market, hoping to accelerate development. It says the new rules are designed to bring transparency to carbon projects and to ensure local communities benefit. And to tell us more about the efforts to develop carbon markets in Uganda is Sam Mugume Kojo. He is Assistant Commissioner in the Ministry of Finance and is playing a key role in Uganda's climate finance strategy. Welcome to DW News Africa, Mr. Kojo. Can you begin by telling us about the potential that you estimate carbon markets offer Uganda?
So carbon pricing and carbon markets are very key for Uganda. One, these are new ways we're looking at fund adaptation and mitigation in terms of financing, in terms of the local revenue that countries can generate. And Uganda being a country with high biodiversity, high levels of forest cover, this is one area that has very, very big potential to raise revenue and be able to reduce on dependency on grants and the expectation of funds. We shall be able to reduce on the loans that we get and hence reduction of increased indebtedness. So carbon pricing with a high level of vegetation cover, high level of biodiversity, the potential is high. We just have to go for it.
Right. And to that effect then, Uganda is developing its carbon market. And can you tell us about how that process is going? Who are the current and potential buyers of Uganda's carbon credits?
We are looking at a number. We are one of the countries in Africa that are highly getting more agreements as far as voluntary carbon markets are concerned, which is a good thing anyway. And we're looking at development partners, developing countries, developed countries, especially in Europe. But the voluntary market is not a good market in my view, because we are not monitoring it strongly from the finance perspective of it as Minister of Finance or Minister of Trade. I will speak up for that at some point if you ask. But the way we're developing the market right now, we are forming a regulatory system. We are forming a carbon market national regulatory framework, which will include a number of things as embedded in our Climate Act. And this goes to the climate change department, where we have the act. And this act shows that there will be a body that will regulate carbon markets and carbon pricing. And we've done that. We've got the regulation now. It's still work in progress. It's still a critical and kind of an area that is not known by many people, but that's where we are going.
And give us a sense of how the people of Uganda, I'm talking about grassroots communities, will benefit from this, because there are countless examples on the continent where carbon credits have been bought and sold, and all that's resulted is people on the ground being displaced.
No, in our case, it's a different case, because one of the things we are doing is we are encouraging people to have to increase vegetation cover in terms of forestry and in terms of vegetation that's absorbing the carbon. And in that way, you will be able to we'll get buyers to buy the carbon credits, bring in money to support the household income and investment in other income generating activities. I know it is a difficult thing where you find land is highly in high populated areas, but one
Mr.
thing
Kojo,
that I know.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, I was going to ask you
please.
about what you would say to the skeptics who see carbon markets as unethical, that it is essentially allowing rich polluters to continue polluting while forcing poor communities to give up their land and livelihoods.
For me, it's not the carbon markets or the carbon prices, but the question is the carbon market as it is now should be transparent, should be able, the price should be good. And then once the price is good and the returns are going to the people, this question and the skeptic people will not be in. For me, that would be the argument. It's not the carbon markets and the carbon credits.
Right, but there is also the criticism about a lack of transparency in carbon markets. How are you tackling this aspect in Uganda?
I totally agree with that, and it's fair, because even if you go to a market of potatoes, if the buyer is going to set the price is going to be the lowest. So that's what we are talking about. The carbon markets and carbon credits, good. But we need to work on the markets, and we as Minister of Finance, we're going into that. We are forming a platform of Minister of Finance for African countries, basically to talk about the carbon markets and how we can raise money to put in adaptation and mitigation.
And I appreciate your insights there. That is the view from Kampala. Sam Mugume Kojo from the Finance Ministry in Uganda. Thanks very much, sir. We appreciate that. Now, even so, initiatives like these can be difficult to understand. Kenya has embraced carbon trading, and the country's president, William Ruto, says he wants it to be, quote, the next significant export for the country. But the strategy is sparking tension, pitting community landowners against so-called carbon developers. And Edith Kimani reports now from Kajiado County.
This stretch of land has belonged to the Olobis family for generations, but maybe not for much longer. Carbon developers want to use their land to sell credits. To do that, the Olobises would have to leave their land untouched and break with traditional grazing patterns. The family says the deal is confusing. Father Olobis Shani fears a land grab and says he's ready to fight to protect his home.
We use this land to graze. We even protect the wild animals ourselves, and we have never needed to sell the land to do that. We know how to protect this area, so we don't need anyone else to come and help us preserve it.
The Olobises are part of the vast Oldonyonyokie group ranch, where the community shares and manages the land together. Used primarily for grazing, this land is attracting carbon developers and causing local leaders to pressure the group to sign over their land rights.
No. There's no room to sit down and talk. Talk about what? We cannot talk. This is our home.
The fears in Oldonyonyokie are fueled by what happened in another community a few kilometers away. Residents in Olkeri signed a carbon credit deal 3 years ago and say the promised benefits never came.
The community land leadership is in bed with the private company that is selling credits. Now we have become invisible somewhere in the middle. Anything they said they would do, we haven't seen.
They gave people fake checks that were meant for bursaries. I was one of them. That check had 50 euros written on it. Then they scrubbed somewhere. I tried to go bank it, but I was told they don't take checks that have been tampered with.
The company behind the project, Souls for the Future Africa, insists all agreements between them and the Kajiado communities were transparent and above board.
These things are done in broad daylight, in an AGM, which brings everybody together. And in the meeting, we had county government representative. So this is a process that is transparent. So if anybody had an issue, he could have raised in the AGM.
Kirkadi says no formal complaints have been filed and that the company hasn't sold any carbon credits yet. But internal emails we've seen show he was informed of concerns about benefits months ago. He claims any money given to the community so far was just a goodwill gesture.
To convince them that this is indeed a viable project and it has happened somewhere, they don't really believe. We decided that for us to be able to motivate people to participate in this project, can we have something small, that we can give them?
Despite the confusion, Kenya has its eyes on the global carbon market. Kenya's government says a 2024 law now requires all carbon credit projects to go through strict approval processes, including environmental and social impact assessments.
Before any project developer goes to initiate a project, there must be the free prior consent from the communities in the law now. They must receive what we call the community development agreements, where the project developer and the communities agree on the project that is going to be done and how the benefits are going to go to the communities.
But what happens to communities like Olkeri, who signed their deals before the new law took effect?
Whatever was meant for the communities goes to the communities, and that is the law. If there is any grievances now within this law, then you can go to the High Court.
Far from the city in Oldonyonyokie, a law meant to protect a community like this seems distant. Here, they say they've been left to navigate a complex carbon market with little support and even less power. As we leave, they ask us a simple question. If the land can make money, who should profit?
to get another civil society voice on carbon markets, we have invited Amos Burudiwemanya from Greenpeace Africa. He's joining me from Nairobi. Welcome to the program, Amos. You are all too familiar with the controversy around carbon credit projects in Kenya. We've just seen one example from Kajiado County. Could you help us understand what is the reason communities are not benefiting from these projects in Kenya so far?
Yeah, most carbon offset projects, especially in Kenya, are facing various challenges, and some of the challenges that the communities are expressing is lack of or incomplete information that is shared with them, especially around how these carbon offset schemes are likely to alter their access to the land that they have been accessing. And you realize that most of the carbon offsetting schemes are being set up in indigenous land areas, majorly pastoralist region in Kenya. And these pastoralists mostly depend on nomadism as a way of coping with the climate impacts. So as a part of carbon offset schemes is to control this movement of livestock. And this information is not clear to them on how these projects will help them and put money to the communities that really need them to be resilient. And that's why we have seen many communities protesting this, but some that have entered into these contracts have had to challenge some of these issues in court. We have seen court rulings that have ruled in favor of communities that had already entered into some of these contracts, because the information that is shared at the point of contract signing is incomplete and does not disclose to the communities how their continued access to land might be affected.
As Greenpeace, you're skeptical about carbon markets more generally. What are some of the other reasons for that?
You see, carbon markets are actually just vehicles that corporates are using to greenwash their activities and to continue to pollute. And this includes shifting the burden and responsibility to the communities that are already suffering the impacts of their actions, which is carbon emissions. And also from a scientific point of view, most carbon offset projects that are being proposed in Kenya are soil carbon removal projects. And this is being compared to the emissions that are produced from burning fossil fuels, which is flawed because you cannot compare the carbon removal to emission reduction. Carbon removal is temporary and unstable, while the emissions that are emitted from burning fossils, for example, stay in the atmosphere for a very long time. So if we are really looking at finding solutions to the climate challenge, then we need to reduce emissions at the source and not bank on measures such as carbon removal that are temporary, that will release eventually these emissions back in the atmosphere and continue to cause the harm that they are already causing.
Right. At the same time, Amos, you are well aware of the fact that a number of African governments in neighboring Uganda, for example, are pursuing developing their carbon markets, adopting regulation. You talked about regulation that's frameworked in the Paris Agreement, for example. As this process is underway, it's almost inevitable because many of our governments on the continent are looking to carbon markets as a source of revenue. What should our governments then be doing to protect indigenous communities like the ones we've been discussing who could be negatively affected by these carbon credit projects?
Yeah, the thing is indigenous communities and most of the African communities have really lived in harmony with nature. And that is something that we really need to recommend. But we should not commodify these lifestyles, this protection of nature. Commodifying it means putting a price on it. We all know that the dividends that we draw from nature, we cannot put a price. When we put a price to it, there is a danger of communities losing the access to the capital world. And I think as governments in Africa develop these regulations and legislations, they must ensure that communities continue to be the custodians of Africa's nature, Africa's land, and continue to have access and that they have had without any limitations that come with some of these schemes that are masked as solutions, but in real sense, they are tools that are used to dispossess communities, especially in indigenous regions.
Amos Burudi Wemanya from Greenpeace Africa, thanks so much. We appreciate your insights and perspective.
Thanks for having me.
That's it for now. Be sure to check out our other stories on dw.com/Africa. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.